I am Vinnie Tortorich, folks. Your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry. I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent at the beginning of this process, but hang in there. Before long, you will be lean and mean. It's the Friday show. And we like to bring in the smart people on Friday. I fell in love with this woman a long time ago. We started bumping into each other backstage at giving talks at different, low carb conventions and whatever. And of course, look, I'm an Italian dude. I'm gonna just gravitate to the prettiest woman back there. And she was always that person. And we got chatting one day, and I realized she's not just pretty; she's damn smart, and she knows what she's talking about. She's got a great podcast. I can't remember the name of it, but that doesn't matter because she has a book out, right? Well, the book is coming out. Is going to be a pre-sale on the book. It's called The Menopause Gut. She's been on the show a few times before. I've been on her show. I think she's Italian, even though she's got the blue eyes and the blonde 25%. 25% Italian. That's why we can't ever get the show going, because we just start yapping and yapping and yapping. And it never seems to end. Folks, you just heard her voice. I'm talking about the beautiful Miss Cynthia Thurlow. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, we love you, Cynthia. So welcome back. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Vinnie. Always a fun pleasure to chat with you. We were catching up in the pre-show about all things related to life.
Yeah. And here we are. We are again. Cynthia, I would have you on once a week if I could. If you were available, I would just make you my Friday co-host, because I never get enough of talking to you. And, you brought a lot of things to light. Early on, I was like, really? What are we talking about? Women have problems when they get older. And it resonated with me because my wife hit a certain age, 51, 52, 53, and all of a sudden menopause came in and things were different. Things were way different. They change. And, I've always said it's kind of funny. Medicine will come out with a low blue pill for guys to get erections until the day they die. Mm-hmm. But it's almost like they go, women, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good. And it makes no sense, right? We figure out ways to help the guys, but the ladies, we leave them hanging a bit. And then, with guys, they call it TRT, mm-hmm. Testosterone replacement therapy. And with women, they call it, that's a different term, right?
Usually HRT.
Yeah. HRT, hormone replay. See, they make it sound good, right? Hormone replay. And you hear all these things and I go, well, should we be on drugs? Should we not be on drugs? I mean, look, just the other day, and I'm all over the place right now, but we'll get there as we always do. I put a thing out. I'm going to paraphrase what I said on the internet, and we were talking about that off the air too. I said, if you weigh a lot, you weigh 350, 400, 560. I talked to people. I talked to a guy today. He told me he quit weighing himself at 600 pounds because he didn't want to know anymore. Mm-hmm. Right. I was trying to help this guy out. I do these phone calls during the day. And I put this thing out and said, look, I get it. When you weigh a lot and there's a drug out there that can help you lose the weight, God, by all means, take it. I said, but don't think that you can stay on those drugs forever, because there's kind of an expiration date on them, number one. Number two, when you see normal sized people taking those drugs, you see what happens, because they don't just lose fat, they lose muscle. And I gave two examples. One example that I gave was Demi Moore.
Oh, absolutely.
And, I showed in the video, you'll see it on my Instagram when you go look later, Cynthia. It's scary. She does not look good. So I used her as an example, but I went, okay, Demi's my age. She's at least 63, and there's some sarcopenia there anyway. So I also showed Kelly Osbourne collecting an award for her father last week, and I was mortified. Someone needs to step in. Okay, I'm not trying to be, I'm just saying someone needs to step in.
Yeah. Well,
This girl's in trouble.
well, and it's interesting. I typically don't comment publicly about celebrities, but in this instance, because as soon as you started talking, I was thinking of Demi Moore. And I think what struck me was, other than the fact she looked very thin, because she was in a black leather outfit with her dog and her hair was short.
Mm-hmm.
And I recall saying to a colleague of mine, I said, God, she looks frail. That is what people don't think about, is that sarcopenia leads to frailty, frailty leads to falls, falls lead to a loss of independence. And that is the trajectory that all of these people are on. And so, they were showing what Demi looked like last year at this time versus now. She's very clearly lost significant amount of weight. And what
Right.
was interesting when I saw Kelly Osbourne and even Sharon Osbourne, they've lost so much body fat. That's why they look so gaunt. And I think that, Hollywood holds itself to standards that maybe the rest of the world does not, because of the body objectification that they have on screen and camera work and all that. But I think ultimately what we're concerned about, not unique to Hollywood, but to the entire United States and westernized world right now, we have extremes. We have a very metabolically obese population, and then we also have people that are using GLP-1s to lose weight, which I think these are very powerful drugs. And I think for some people, they're maybe having the first success they've ever had in their entire lives. But the other side of that is, if you're simply taking the drugs and you're not changing lifestyle, you're going to end up becoming frail, falling, breaking a hip, hitting your head, and losing independence. And so I think when people are prescribing these medications, they must do so responsibly. And part of being responsible is body composition evaluation, protein intake requirements, strength training requirements. Otherwise, the drugs shouldn't be prescribed, in my humble estimation. And as someone who can prescribe these drugs, I think that is the responsible thing for the prescriber to do and for the patient, because these weight loss mills that are out there that are just doling out GLP-1s without any instructions or recommendations, I mean, we're going to end up having the whole opposite issue that's going to be forthcoming. You're going to have people that are 50-year-olds acting like they're 95-year-olds because they've lost so much skeletal muscle mass. And it is a hell of a lot harder to put muscle mass on as we get older. Not impossible, but harder.
Well, that's the argument that started on my Instagram and Twitter. They were like, dude, nothing's ever worked. And I lost all this weight on the GLP-1. I didn't lose any muscle. Okay, that's a lie, because we know that even if you don't take a GLP-1, and by the way, I was part of Hollywood and the weight loss community for 31 of my 42 years of doing this. And what I know is, when you take 100 pounds off of someone naturally without drugs, at least 20 or 25 of those pounds are muscle. That's best case scenario. That's why I would always tell my clients, listen, I could get you to lose 100 pounds and you never have to exercise a day in your life, but you need to exercise because that's the fountain of youth. You need to put muscle on. You need to fight against the weight loss the entire time. With the GLP-1s, according to Ben Bikman et al., they all tell me the same thing. You would be lucky to only lose 25 pounds on a GLP-1 or a semaglutide or any of the glutides, right? They're talking 50 and 60% of that could come from muscle wasting. So the point was, I wasn't saying don't take a GLP-1. I was saying if you do, we're looking at normal people who took them. And by the way, you mentioned Sharon Osbourne. I saw her in an interview about a year ago now, where she stopped. She went, oh my God, it was wrecking my life. I was so weak, because Sharon is older. Sharon is older than you. And well, you're younger than me, but Sharon is I'm 63. I think Sharon's probably 70 or 75. Yeah. It was wrecking her life to where she was so frail, she couldn't get out of bed. She couldn't move.
That's scary.
Right? So Sharon stopped doing them, but Kelly who's a very young lady and a beautiful girl. She looked absolutely scary.
Yeah, she looked very gaunt. I mean, the thing I was struck by was the degree of fat loss. I mean, just the volume loss in her face
Yeah.
was so shocking, and I think it's gotta be hard for people in Hollywood. It's hard just for regular people on social media, but I think it's even harder when we're looking at celebrities and famous people because they're hearing this onslaught of, you know, maybe well-intended feedback that they're getting constantly, but I think when you are in and certainly you could speak to this better than I could. I've never lived in that world, but I can imagine if everyone is doing or utilizing GLP-1s for fat loss, weight loss, you start to normalize what people look like. They call them the lollipop women. I'm sure you probably have heard that term,
Yeah.
where they have these little bodies and this big head, like their head is the biggest thing on their bodies. And I think before people just had to restrict food or purge or binge or whatever they did to maintain like significant weight loss. But now with these drugs, I think it feeds into some disordered relationships with food that people already have. That's my guess.
It does. And, it's right here in my own house. Even though I live in Virginia now, my wife still works in Hollywood. And, y- you know, well, I guess I can say she just signed another contract to go back and she plays a character on one of the soap operas. No, geez, it's Days of Our Lives. I had to think about it for a second. Um, so she gets the phone call. This is in real time right now. She got the phone call about 3 weeks ago, and she signed a contract to go back and shoot several more episodes. They bring her character back and forth. She's the mother of someone, so they
Okay.
don't need her there all the time, right? So now you know what my wife looks like
She's
on any
stunning.
given day. She gets the phone call. Her agent goes, they're handing you a contract. Before she even signed the contract, she was back. I noticed my coconut oil started going away. Like she starts tightening up her diet a lot, right? Because they know what they look like on camera.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't hide on camera,
No.
right? She knows what she wants her face to look like. She knows what her neckline needs to look like. She knows that when she turns away from the camera, she doesn't want to have any kind of pooch or back fat. And this is a thin woman,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she's like going, the other day I said to her, I went, because she does tea time every day. That's her thing. And she'll have cheese and something else for tea time. She's been just drinking tea. I mean, that's where they get to. That's Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to go on until that contract ends, probably sometime in the summer. And then she'll go back to being normally thin again. That's how crazy it is out there. And that's the world I used to live in. That's why I was able to make a living. I know what goes on. And now you got, a syringe that gets you there.
That blunts your appetite. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the things about, the second generations, the terzepatides that I think a lot of people are familiarized with, it's both a GLP-1 and a GIP. So it acts in the brain. And for a lot of people, it blunts all their cravings. So I've had patients tell me, I don't even think about alcohol. I don't think about those chips anymore. And I don't think about dessert ever. And maybe in some ways that's great. It quiets the food noise. But I think for a lot of other people, if they're taking higher and higher doses, it can just give them no appetite whatsoever. And that's what I get concerned about, is that you're getting to a point where some people are just not nourishing their bodies. So they're not going to be able to fuel through a workout. They're not going to be able to get themselves out of bed, a la Sharon, who mentioned that she stopped when she realized she had no energy to get out of bed. That just speaks to a low energy state in general. That kind of relative energy deficiency, the REDS, that becomes problematic for a lot of people.
Yeah. Look, it's, and people like to go, one guy wrote, he goes, "You're just jealous because no one's going to need you anymore." I think, nah, I think I'm good. I think, people like you and
Wow.
me are going to be needed for a long time. And drugs, I always say drugs are never truly the answer. You might need them to help you along as a crutch, but you need to correct what you're doing. And we're going to talk about that in a second because I want to learn all about the menopause gut. But first, folks, I need to tell you all about Jasper. Jasper, Jaspr. There's no E in there. They spelled Jasper wrong. Jasper.co/Vinnie. Go there right now. If you put the /Vinnie in there, you save $300 on your Jasper unit. Jasper.co/Vinnie. Look, folks, I'm always honest. So I'm going to just be perfectly honest here. When Mike Feldstein was on the show and he started talking about his air scrubber and how it cleans up the house and the whole thing, and they sent me one for free, and I just threw it in my office. And you guys know the story. After a year of using my Concept 2, when I opened it up to clean the impellers after 1 million meters, because I row about 1 million meters a year, the impellers were perfectly clean. That's when I freaked out. I went, this thing really works, right? And then when I called Mike and told him that, he goes, well, why don't you sell them on your podcast? I said, Mike, no one's going to buy this thing because it's so expensive. Folks, there's a longer waiting list. They finally caught up, but it's because of this podcast. You guys have been buying these things out because they give us the biggest discount they give. If you go to their website, the best discount you're going to get is $200 off. By putting my name in, jasper.co/Vinnie, you get $300 off. People have bought as many as six Jaspers. I have 2 in my house. They sent one to Anna Vocino for free. You know what Anna's doing? She's buying a second one. These things are amazing. You're not going to believe how it changes the quality of the air in your house. Jasper.co/Vinnie. Go check it out right now. By putting my name in, you will save $300 every time. We're talking to the woman who wrote the book, The Menopause Gut. Cynthia, thanks for indulging me in this whole idea of GLP-1s and everything, because I don't think they're a bad idea. I just think that it's a crutch you should use on your way to getting healthy again and then trying to figure out how to get off of them. Because one of the things I've learned is some people, it's kind of like when you have, when they used to gastric bypass surgeries, which they're still doing, people end up eating through those. And people are now eating through the GLP-1s. I know people that are doing that. I have a brother who has done that. He's on the highest dose of Mounjaro you can get, and he still overeats.
Really? So you have to wonder if there's some secondary issue. I mean, I think you bring up a good point that people assume, because of the popularity of GLP-1s, that personal trainers aren't going to be necessary. I'll tell you one thing. I was talking to my personal trainer, who I love, and I pay her to kick my ass because I wouldn't push myself as hard as she does.
Yeah.
We were having a conversation and I said, Linda, I'm curious, has your business been impacted by GLP-1s? She said, absolutely not. And she said, the good people are still going to hire. Like, I think in general in life, the best people hire coaches. So I have a business coach, I have a personal training coach, and I do that to hold myself accountable and to work towards goals. And so I think the best people are still going to hire personal trainers because there's always something more to learn. Like, from my perspective, yes, could I go to the gym and do a bunch of workouts? Sure. But when I show up for my trainer, I show up with intensity, with integrity, and, she kicks my butt. And let's be frank, when you're working out with someone, you're going to push yourself harder than if you're working out by yourself. Maybe not you, Vinnie, but the rest of us, mere mortals.
Not me, because I've been doing this my whole life and this is what I do. But I'm an outlier, right? I hate myself enough to do it. But sometimes, like, I have a gym right here. I mean, you can see the rack behind me. There are days when I go, I'm not really into this. So I'll go to the gym in town because I know, like, even in my mind, even though no one's paying attention, but if I see my buddy Matt over there or Don or any of the guys that, or Latasha or any of them, I know that, okay, I need to work harder because they're working hard. So just being around other people is what I use for motivation when I need it. But, to your point, and I've used this example on the show before, I wanted to get really good at skeet shooting, I can, you put a shotgun in my hand and I've been shooting shotguns my whole life. I've been bird hunting. I'm an excellent trap shooter. I'm good at sporting clays. And then when I moved here, there was a skeet field not far from me. So I went, okay, I'm going to get good at skeet. So I went out and had a shotgun especially made for that, to fit me, especially for skeet and the whole thing. And of course, right away, I was at a certain level because of my skill of doing this one thing my entire life. But I'm not the best.
Right.
So then you ask yourself, how do you become the best? Well, I can waste a lot of money. I've always said the cheapest part about shooting sports is buying the gun, right?
Mhm.
People know guns are expensive. Not as expensive as your time
Yep.
and the ammunition you need to put in the gun. That's where the expense starts. Now, I can spend tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours trying to get good. Or I can pay a coach $400 or $500 for a couple of hours of his time and save all of that ammunition, save all of that headache, save all of that time, and just move right ahead.
Mhm.
Who wouldn't do that? I mean, the math is that simple,
Yeah.
right? You want to get to the next level, hire someone just like you. You're a good businesswoman. I know, I see what you're doing. And I look at what you've done, and I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
But you got a business coach because it works.
Yeah. I mean, I tell everyone, I mean, I from over the last 10 years, I've had several business coaches, and I always feel like each time I hire a new coach, my business goes to a new level. And so I think for a lot of individuals, this can translate into so many areas of our lives, but you want to get better, you hire a coach, period, end of story. And they
Yeah.
hold you accountable. And, it's funny, my business coach is a badass. And so I look to her and I'm like, I want to lead exactly the way you do, but I want to be able to look to people who are already doing what I want to create within my business and are doing so successfully with integrity, all those things. But I think a lot of times people don't realize that. They're like, oh, it's expensive. Any type of coach, oh, it's expensive. No, it's an investment. That's the differentiator.
And I've always said, when you pay that money, you pay attention to it, right?
Yes.
I learned something. We gave away my PDF over 300,000 times for free. And then as a thought experiment, I put a $10 charge on it. Now people take it seriously, because once you pay any amount of money, I could have made it $1, I could have made it $20. It doesn't matter what I made it. That becomes the thing, right? People, oh my God, I just paid this money. I might as well read it, right? And it becomes, so adding a $10 charge to it makes people want to do. People, you'll pay $500. You already know how to shoot a shotgun. It's just, you just pull the low trigger, right? And yeah. But you go from hitting 22 on average per round to hitting 24, 25, which 25 is the best you can do per round, just by listening to someone. And guess what? Sometimes you start screwing up again. You know what you do? You call that coach back and go, hey, can you come out here and stand behind me? Here's a couple $100. Show me, why am I screwing up again? Right? A lot of times when you get to that level, it's in between the, as we say, it's in between the earmuffs.
Yeah.
And you just have to go figure it out again.
Well,
Right.
and I think it's like anytime you learn something new, I mean, was it Malcolm Gladwell that said you have to do something for 10,000 hours to be proficient? And people sometimes want to take they think that the practice isn't important, but whether it's psychomotor skills, whether it's fine motor skills, whatever it is, I mean, you have to sometimes do something over and over and over again to be proficient.
Yeah. And by the way, people always say to me, they'll go, you make podcasting look easy. And it's like, I got 3,000 hours.
Yeah.
With it, that's how you get there. And before that, I did a radio show. So you get a couple of thousand hours in you, and then you'll be pretty good. I want to talk about the book, Cynthia, because I can sit here and just wax poetic. Well, the menopause gut. Look, I hear a lot about the gut biome, the gut this, the gut that, everything with the gut, everything is the gut. All the doctors are into the gut. I'm into the gut. I understand how it works. How does the gut react? Well, let's start with this. Give us a definition. You start going, you have perimenopause, you have menopause, you have postmenopause, you have all this menopause. When I was a kid, back in my mom's day, they just called it the change.
Yep.
Right. And now we got peri, pre, peri, post. Give us some definitions. Start us with that.
Yeah, it can get a little confusing, all the terminology. So for women, perimenopause is 5 to 10 years preceding menopause. Ironically enough, menopause is one day when it's 12 months that you've not had a menstrual cycle. And so the rest of your life is in postmenopause, but we just use the term menopause just to shorten it. Now, men also conversely go through andropause, but it's not nearly as dramatic. I think for many women, it's helpful for them to think about perimenopause as reverse puberty, because just like when you were 12 or 13 years old, your hormones are ramping up. This is when your hormones are declining, and what oftentimes will drive a lot of the symptoms that women experience to a point or a degree, really dependent. I tell women mostly perimenopause is as unique as you are, so that people understand there can be over 100 different symptoms, but not every woman experiences all of those symptoms. A great deal of what we experience is driven by the health of our microbiome. And so this book, The Menopause Gut, despite the name, which is a double entendre, the book is really speaking to what is changing the gut microbiome for women. And it is significant because I think of the gut microbiome as literally the quarterback of the body, because it's communicating and interfacing with every organ system, including our ovaries, our bones, our brain, etc. And because we can't see it, it's not tangible. People assume it's not significant, but it is 40 trillion bacteria, viruses, fungi, and protozoa in the large intestine or colon, depending on your preference. And it really becomes this important communication center. And as those hormones decline, we see a lot of symptoms. As those neurotransmitters decline, we can see changes in mood. So it's not at all uncommon for women to say, I have more anxiety, more depression, I don't understand. Traditional allopathic medicine in many instances thinks first, oh, you need an antidepressant or anti-anxiety agent, when in some instances they need hormones that will actually improve their mood, their anxiety, their depression. And so I'm not making light of the fact there are people that do benefit from antidepressants, anti-anxiety drugs, but I always think that if we were thinking more thoughtfully about where a woman was in her cycle when she's having symptoms or where she was in her life stage, it might help us tease those things out a little bit better for her.
Okay, I fell asleep. So I want more. Give it to me in a way a second grader would understand it.
Okay.
All right, so we're talking chicken. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it the gut that caused the hormones to go wacky? Was it the hormones that caused the gut to go wacky?
I think
or do we even know? It's okay if we don't know.
I don't think we know definitively. We know that the gut is important for metabolizing and breaking down hormones. So there's that piece. We know that the gut talks to our ovaries, just like in men, the gut talks to your testicles. And I think that's really interesting. There's all this kind of cross communication. Think of literally as the quarterback. You're a football player. The gut microbiome is the quarterback of the body. It's that important.
Okay. So, all right. So let's talk about that. We could let's stick with women. Let's stay away from the testicles and the this and that. So, because it'll get more confusing.
Yep.
Right. And it is called the menopause, not the andropause. So let's keep it in a realm, because we could get all over the place. Does the gut talk directly to the ovaries, or does it go to the pituitary or somewhere else and say, hey, this is what's going on? And then the pituitary goes, something's going on here. We need to fire back and do something different.
Well, if
I remember right, just reading through what you have, one thing causes another thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to simplify it for the audience.
Yeah. So think about it this way. There's a gut ovarian axis, meaning it goes from the gut to the ovaries and back. There's also a gut brain axis. So, the communication superhighway is the vagus nerve. So it just communicates back and forth. Think of it as a long superhighway. There's communication going back and forth constantly. So if in perimenopause, when hormones are going down, The ovaries are communicating to the gut, but more importantly, the brain is telling the gut, like, what's going on here? And so there's this constant interplay between the organs and the gut. It's not as if it's, it goes one direction. It is very bi-directional. That's the fancy way of explaining it goes back and forth, constantly relaying information. So the brain is screaming at the ovaries, oh, by the way, make some more hormones. And the ovaries are saying, no, we're kind of checking out here. So there's this constant interplay of information.
Now, we realize that, the body, as we get older, it starts checking out. We start dying the day we were born, right? And before we know it, telomeres are getting shorter and shorter and this and that and the whole thing. And I feel like we found Band-Aids, right? Mm-hmm. We found, testosterone and estrogen and cortisol. Not cortisol, but people do take cortisol, I guess.
President Kennedy.
Say again?
President Kennedy, that's how he lived. He had something called Addison's.
Yeah. So we know that we can doctor ourselves by taking exogenous hormones. That's been going on for a long time. And they're doing that with women. Now, I look at my mom, right? And this is going off into left field just a little bit. But my mom had, they yanked the plumbing when she was fairly young because she had cysts and the whole thing. And since her mom died of breast cancer, that was back in the days when they went, you got cysts, we're yanking the plumbing, right? You're not having kids anymore. We're going to pull this. And then they said, okay, you're going to be on hormones for the rest of your life. So they put, now folks, understand what I'm saying. Back in her day, she's still around, but back in her day, they would put them on a really strong birth control pill, right? Because that was the hormone. They would take these, whatever that pill was, right? And one night she wakes up at 2 a.m. when she's like 60, about my age, about 63, 64. Her legs are in a lot of pain. She pulls the covers back. Her legs are swollen. She almost dies from blood clots.
Oh my God.
Right. And then he went, oh, it's because you've been on these hormones for all these years, these heavy hormones. And so it scares me, right? Hormones scare me, right? I know it's a fix. I know women love their HRT. Men yell every time I talk about TRT and say, hey, maybe not, and the whole thing. I get that. But these drugs seem to help a lot of people too. Where are we on that?
Yeah. So your mom, so this is really interesting. Your mom is probably in her 80s.
She's 86, I think. She's
okay. So I think it's amazing that when she was probably in her 40s, so 40 years ago, her practitioner, because your mom was not yet in menopause, put her on oral contraceptives, and then she stayed on that for a long period of time. Now, oral contraceptives are at a different dose than HRT. So that's number one. Number two, they're also synthetic hormones. So it's not the same as body identical or bioidentical progesterone or estrogen. But minus the fact that she got a blood clot in her legs, which is a terrible thing that can happen when you're taking birth control pills. What's interesting is in 2002, there was a study that came out called the Women's Health Initiative that kind of changed the narrative. So your mom preceded that. So she was still on hormones. My mom, so the baby boomer generation was impacted. My mom's generation was either taken off of hormones or never given them the option. So fast forward to my generation, and now we have different thoughts around hormone replacement therapy. And here's my kind of gestalt about this. If you live long enough, you're going to enter menopause. That's going to happen. You can't forego menopause. It will happen eventually. But we know in the absence of hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and depending on the person, testosterone, our risks of certain things go up. Most women will die of heart disease, 1 in 3. It's the number one killer of women. Women are protected until they go into menopause because of estrogen. Interestingly enough, people assume, well, if you don't have a uterus, you don't need to worry about progesterone. But progesterone is important for bone health, just like estrogen is. Estrogen is now used as primary prevention for osteoporosis. And we're still evolving with the research on brain health, but we're making assumptions that estrogen replacement will also benefit brain health. So from those perspectives, I don't personally see that as a Band-Aid. I see that as living without hormones is not optimal. And I aim for, like, for me personally, I think about it from an optimal perspective. I think that I'm 54 years old. I am cognitively sharp as a tack. I have, I've had every cardiovascular workup. Other than having crappy genetics, I've got, very low cardiovascular risk. My bones are strong. My brain is working right. And the research is evolving about the gut too, that it can be helpful. So I think when we're framing the context of hormone replacement therapy in women, it's in the context of, number one, fully informed consent so that women make the decision with the best information that they receive. Number two, understanding what are the benefits for each individual, right? I have terrible family history of heart disease in my family. Terrible.
Right.
Like both sets of grandparents, everyone had heart disease. So I look at it as, I'm a thin Caucasian woman. Estrogen's probably a good decision for me because it'll protect my bones and I will avoid ever developing osteoporosis. And if anyone that's listening doesn't fully appreciate, bone is a living organ. It is not just a skeleton. And so along with losing muscle mass, women also lose bone mass, and that's also equally problematic. But the way that I look at it is every woman listening has the ability or should have the ability to have a conversation with her provider about what are their choices, because not everyone wants to be on HRT, and that's okay. And there's another element, we can talk about vaginal estrogen. That's a whole separate conversation, but these components become important when we're trying to reduce our likelihood of developing disease, along with lifestyle. Like we've talked about, sleep, stress management, nutrition, exercise are all equally important. I look at HRT as the icing on the cake, meaning you have to do the foundational work, like major in the majors. The lifestyle piece is still really important. If you have a terrible lifestyle, if you eat standard American diet, you're a couch potato, you have terrible stress, you don't sleep well, HRT isn't going to fix all that. So you still have to address lifestyle in middle age. And I can tell you the patients of mine that are doing the best in middle age and beyond are the ones that are addressing lifestyle. Before, they don't necessarily have to do it concurrently with HRT, but HRT is not a Band-Aid. It is the icing on the cake. And that's how I view it, that I think that you have to view it that way. It's adding to your life to improve your quality of life.
There's a woman, I don't know her very well, but it seems like, we both belong to the same rowing club out there on the Rivanna. And she, I want to say last year she was 70. So she's 71 now. And turns out we both would show up because I can go rowing midday, right? Work in the morning, do something midday, and then come back to work. And she, I don't know how she got into it, but everyone at the rowing club somehow figured out that I'm a trainer and that I might know something. And she said to me one day, she goes, "What do you think about HRT for women?" I went, "Yeah, I'm not a doctor. I don't know." I said, "Is that something you're considering?" And she goes, "Well, I've been on it for about 2 years." And I said, "Oh, tell me about it." And she goes, "Well, it took my doctor a couple of years to get the dose right." I was halfway listening to her because we're carrying boats down to the water. And, the last thing I need to talk to women about is what's going on with their vagina or anything else. But apparently I got that kind of face that says, "Hey, please come tell me all about what's going on in your underpants." And so I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Yeah, she goes, I've worked out my whole life. I work out with weights. I do everything. I row 5 days a week from early spring until we can't row anymore in the fall." And she goes, "And I work out at home and I work out at the gym and I do powerlifting." And she said, "I just fell off of a cliff."
Yeah.
She goes, I was, and she's doing the whole, I was hanging in there through my 50s. I just fell off of a cliff. She said, I thought about suicide. I just wasn't enjoying life anymore. And, I wasn't interested in sex and just all the things. Right. And I'm like, God, can I get this boat in the water any faster? In these conversations, you can't do that. Right. You have to stay and have the conversation. And, I said, "So you said it took you a couple of years." And I'm asking you this question. She goes, Yeah, we tried bioidenticals and we tried the this and the that, and there was a higher amount of progesterone, and then she raised the T up a little bit, and then she brought the E up a little bit, the estrogen and testosterone, and we had to work. And she finally found my level. She meaning her doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she was an NP. I don't know, right? I don't know who the person. It might have been one of your clients. Who knows?
Yeah.
She goes, she finally figured it out, and I said, well, how do you feel now? She goes, I feel like a teenager again. I feel like I have my life back. And when you hear that story, you go, who am I to tell people not to take this stuff?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me. I'm sure, in a past life, I might have had opinions about hormone replacement therapy, but I've seen it magically transform some people's lives. And I do think that for what I do and how much word recall and thought process goes into speaking and public speaking, like I can't imagine being on a stage and like having trouble finding a word. I can't imagine with the volume of podcasting and speaking I do every day, trying to struggle with word finding. So when I hear stories like that, it just reaffirms for me why HRT for a lot of people really changes their lives. And I mean, I've had women tell me, they got put on antidepressants, they got put on anti-anxiety meds, and what they really needed was progesterone, or what they really needed was that estrogen patch, or what they really needed for their executive function. And this is what people forget about testosterone. They think about it so much of it as a libido hormone. And I'm like, listen, it's an executive function, get your ass off the couch hormone. That's what people forget. It is a motivating hormone, and women have 1/10 of the amount of men, but it's so potent in our bodies. It's really important. And so I sometimes get frustrated when people say, well, there's no FDA approved testosterone. Well, not yet. There will be. But I think in a lot of instances that women, when they start HRT, they get it to their optimized dose, whether it's of estrogen or progesterone or testosterone, they just feel like themselves. And I think that you can go through many years of hormonal decline where you're just barely hanging on, but it's happening so slowly that all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, I don't even know who I am anymore.
That's what this woman said. She said she literally started contemplating suicide.
Wow.
And like, and that, you're out midday and you just want, and the whole time I'm out there rowing, I'm like, matter of fact, I did that thing. I said, are you going upriver or downriver? And she goes, I'm going upriver. I'm like, oh, I'm going downriver today.
Like that fast.
Yes. I was rowing as fast as I could. And it turns out we've become friends since then, right? And well, after you learn all that, how can you not? But, I think about that kind of thing. And, one of the big questions, because the only coaching I do, we have a VIP group when I do the coaching twice a month and the whole thing within my VIP group. But I still do the private coaching because I like talking to people one-on-one. And whenever I get a guy on the phone and they're plus 45 and usually plus 50 or 55, they ask about TRT.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and they'll say to me, what do you think? And I always say to them, listen, I've beaten cancer twice. I don't think it's for me, right? But there are a lot of guys who are doing it and they feel great and they feel wonderful. I don't know if it cuts 2 or 3 years off at the end of your life. I don't know if it cuts 5 years off. I don't know what it does, but they're happy right now. So again, it's like what you said. It's like you make that decision, right? What do you do? Do you do it? Do you not do it? I don't know. I don't know what to tell people. What do you tell me? Where are you on TRT, or do you even deal with that at all?
I mean, I don't prescribe medication or have male patients, but I do have colleagues that I refer out to for individuals that do need that kind of support. And I think that, we have an epidemic of low testosterone in the United States. I think part of it's our toxic environment, with endocrine mimicking chemicals. And I think it's also the poor metabolic health that are two contributing factors. But just like women, men will also go through andropause. It's just not nearly as dramatic. But I think for a lot of people, a lot of men, just in talking to people, they're like, I feel so much better on testosterone replacement. And you can look at lab values to determine whether they're male or female, to determine like, where are you? Are you in the middle of a distribution curve, or are you on the low end? And you may very well benefit from some replacement, not so that you're out there, looking like, I mean, clearly you can tell people that are not just doing TRT, that are doing anabolic drugs.
Right.
That's a whole separate conversation. But, I think for a lot of people, it probably is improving their body composition, probably their mental health. I think you take it on a case-by-case basis. I mean, do I know people personally that are not on TRT who still have optimal testosterone levels? Yes. And I think that's great. But it has been more the norm that men are suboptimal or low testosterone, both free and total values. And it's one thing if they're insulin resistant and you fix that, maybe things improve, maybe they clean up their nutrition, their diet, their environment. But I think we're an instant gratification society. I think there are a lot of people that are like, oh, I don't want to change anything, so just give me the replacement. And so that's a whole separate conversation, but I think it's very bio-individual.
Well, look, I'm an M1 experiment. So my testosterone has been low ever since my first round of chemo back in 2007. I went along and raced in ultra races through 2014 after this. So another 7 years of racing with low T. It never seemed to bother me. I'm 63 now. And now I monitor my strength in the gym, right? I monitor a few things, leg strength. I use the bench press and the shoulder press to measure pushing away. And I use pull-ups at a very slow rate to measure pulling towards me. And I test myself constantly. And it's like, okay, at 63, I'm the same as I was at 60 and at 58. And so when I ask my doctor, my GP, and I'll say, okay, my number, the high number, if I go in the morning and do blood, my high number has been 400.
Okay.
I've been as low as 250 total.
That's low. Yeah.
It's very low. It's like Joe Biden low. Like I'm about to die. Right. And I'll say to her, how is it I'm able to keep my strength where it is? And she said, the only thing, and I've asked another doctor about this. She said, the only thing I can see is that your body utilizes your free testosterone very efficiently. So apparently there's more to do with the free testosterone. My body,
your body can use. Yep.
And also I live pretty optimally, right? I work out to failure and I eat a shit ton of protein, right? So my body is grabbing some of everything.
I think it's your mitochondrial health. I think that has a lot to do with it, Vinnie.
Could be.
I mean, in addition to what else you're saying, I mean, I think that
Can you explain a little bit about that? Just talk to the audience about mitochondrial health.
Yeah. So our mitochondria are essentially the powerhouses of our cells. And so as we get older, after the age of 40, we have a degree of mitochondrial decline and dysfunction. And as we get older, we just don't produce as much healthy mitochondria. So it kind of becomes this vicious cycle. Like I'm sure your community has heard the word ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's like the energy currency in the cell. And the mitochondria are responsible for that. But what's interesting is there's definitely this connection between mitochondrial health and symptoms of middle age and beyond. There's definitely that. And then, things like I can go to failure, I can really push my body. And because you're a conditioned athlete, I think you have a greater bodily awareness than probably the average person. But I think part of it's a conditioning response. And I think it's probably also your mitochondrial efficiency. Plus, I think you're just someone that, you're stressing the mitochondria just enough and giving it optimal fuel. I mean, because you eat so healthy, I think all those things play in your favor. You probably have some genetic advantage also. Like I was talking to someone, I think earlier this week, and they were talking about the genetic physicality piece, that some of these conditioned athletes just are genetically gifted to begin with, that whether it's speed or strength or recovery, just things that are probably better than the average person on a good day, right?
Well, I do know that when it comes to aerobics, because I haven't fallen off of the cliff I thought I would have fallen off of at
Mhm.
63. Just looking at VO2 max and looking at, my zone two is still crazy. I mean, if you take the average, my zone two should probably max out at my age at somewhere between 120, 125 beats per minute. And my zone two maxes out. I don't hit zone three until I'm at 140 beats per minute.
Really?
But you see, I've been an aerobic athlete ever since I stopped being an anaerobic athlete when I was 21. That's when I stopped playing football and I just hopped on a bike and never got off. So there's something there. Even when I was on chemo, right after chemo, when my hematocrit level was shot, because chemo just messes up your blood, right? All of the numbers are off. What's that one they always talk about that you got to get back up for your immune system?
White blood cells,
Yeah, but
platelets.
more, the neutrophils and all
Yep.
that within the white blood cell. Even when all that shot, because I have a controlled environment right here in my gym, I would still get on my equipment with hematocrit levels that are like 28, right?
Wow. Under 30. So for listeners, just to have an idea, that's pretty low. Like under 30, people are generally symptomatic, which also kind of connects with like your hemoglobin's probably 9 or maybe 8.5. So that's pretty low. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I think you have a superior, whether it's your ATP recycling. I mean, I think your mitochondria are healthier than others.
It probably is, so that, people understand ATP is part of the Krebs cycle. It turns into ATPase, and, that's why creatine works the way creatine works, and it helps with the mitochondrial health. And somehow I'm able to still, get on the bike and produce something. Now, the key is when I get off the bike, I'm shot. I can't stay on the bike as long right after chemo and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I have the rest of the day when I can just nap, right? And people don't realize the regenerative effects. And I know it's not part of what you're talking about, but can we talk a little bit about sleep and the regenerative effects of sleep when it comes to menopause and everything we're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I think of sleep as foundational to our health. So if you don't sleep well, that's the first thing we have to work on. And it's important for people to understand that you have to be in bed long enough. Now, that might be different for everyone listening. Some people might need 7 hours and other people need 9. But, the first few hours of sleep are really important because that's typically when we're in deep sleep. And this is when the glymphatic system, which is essentially like a brain toilet. That's the way to think about it. I mean, think about it as a second grader. It's a brain toilet. It's when your body can rid itself of tau particles and toxins and waste that would otherwise take up too much valuable energy while you're awake. And so deep sleep becomes critically important. Unfortunately, with age, deep sleep declines. I mean, ideally, we want to have an hour, hour and a half minimum of deep sleep. So if you have an Oura ring or a Whoop band, you can probably track it. And then we alternate between, an episode of deep sleep and REM throughout the night. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that sleep duration does play a role in metabolic health. So I remind people that if you sleep less than 6 hours a night, you'll reduce your ability to control your blood glucose by about 30%, which then leads to poor dietary choices and not feeling like exercising. And so what's interesting is sleep is influenced by hormones, not surprisingly. When women are in early perimenopause, they may struggle with falling asleep as progesterone declines. As they kind of move through perimenopause into menopause, they may have trouble staying asleep, which can be driven by several factors, but can be worsened by less estrogen. And women become less stress resilient through this middle age process. So if you're stressing or worried about things, that can show up in your sleep. And that can have a lot to do with cortisol. Cortisol can wake us up. We can also wake up if our blood sugar drops. And I know for people that are low carb or ketogenic, sometimes that can be mitigated. Some of us are more sensitive to carbohydrate intake than others. The other thing that's interesting is, melatonin is such a poorly understood hormone, but melatonin is really important for sleep, but also antioxidant benefits, and melatonin also declines. So all these hormones are declining in middle age and can exacerbate sleep quality, but sleep really is foundational. And if you're not sleeping well, whether you're male or female, that is the first thing you have to work on, because from poor sleep comes poor metabolic health, an inability to exercise, poor dietary choices. Like I jokingly tell people, when I've had 4 hours a night of sleep, guess what? I'm not going to crave healthy food. Not
Yeah.
because I don't want to eat the healthy food, but my body's like, I want the junk. And that's just going to perpetuate worsening, metabolic health as well.
Yeah. You're talking about falling off of a cliff. You may not know anything about this. This is coming out of left field. And if you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to, but way back when, boy, she was early money. I knew this woman in Hollywood. She wasn't a close friend or anything, but she was an acquaintance. Suzanne Summers was early money we used to call it in college, the junk hormone, DHEA.
Yep.
And nobody knows what DHEA really is or what it does. We just know that our body makes a lot of it. And as we age, it stops making it. It shuts it down. Suzanne Summers, because of her husband, I knew Alan. Actually, I knew Suzanne better. That's all she talked about. She wrote books about it, right? Where are we on DHEA, and what is it? Do we need it? Do we not need it? What's going on with that? In this country, it's over the counter. I think in Canada, it's a prescription, or it's a class something drug. In Europe, who knows what it is? And we could just buy this stuff on Amazon in this country. What is it, and how does it work?
Yeah, it's a hormone that's kind of cleaved. So the kind of mother hormone is allopregnanolone, and from that, your body makes progesterone and then DHEA. And DHEA is important because ultimately, from that DHEA sulfate can produce testosterone. It's interesting. I have tried DHEA. I've given it to my husband. I've given it to myself. They talk about it as being an anti-aging hormone. I do see when we're talking about adrenal health that, sometimes you can get a sense of whether or not someone's adrenal health is really depleted, looking at cortisol and DHEA. But in terms of supplementing, I honestly haven't had patients report that they feel differently. I mean, I took it for a while because mine was low. Not surprisingly, mine's low because I'm in menopause. But even with my husband, I said to him, do you feel any different taking DHEA? And he said, no. And so I think that there's an optimal range that integrative medicine would like us to be within. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, I've seen better effects from giving testosterone, giving progesterone, giving estradiol, which is the predominant form of estrogen our bodies make, till menopause. So, I understand people's reasoning around it, but I just haven't seen clinical benefit. And that's where I kind of come from. I don't think it's going to hurt you. And that's probably why it is an over-the-counter supplement as opposed to something that's prescribed. But I think in a lot of ways, what I find interesting is how other countries perceive it to be something that needs to be controlled, as opposed to here, people are like, it's not a big deal. I just don't see much clinical benefit. That has been my clinical experience and my personal experience.
Yeah, I've heard only anecdotal stuff from people going, oh my God, it changed everything. And then when I go on the NIH or anywhere else and just read the studies, it's just not there. They provide small studies with older people saying, there was a 5% increase with men who were not exercising, and then they started exercising. And I'll go, okay, well, you'll probably get a 5% increase anyway without DHEA, right?
Right. And I think, we're in an environment where people in many instances would rather take the supplement than change a lifestyle habit. And I'm like, gosh, there's a million other things like creatine that I would say you would clearly get benefit from creatine monohydrate. I think that's one of those, it applies to most people. It's going to be beneficial versus DHEA. I just don't see the clinical utility. And I think it just ends up creating expensive urine.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. But, again, if it's something that messes with hormones, I like to stay away from it. I guess, look, folks, I'm not going to sit here and talk about the book. I could have sat here with Cynthia and talked about the book and all the things they wanted me to talk about, gut microbiome and inflammation and insulin sensitivity and all the stuff, perimenopause, premenopause, estrobolome or whatever the hell that is. ovarian aging, and so, trauma. I don't care about that. You go read the book and you're going to learn about this stuff. The book is called The Menopause Gut. So you go get the book if you want to learn about the menopause gut, and it's going to be out. When is it going to be out, Cynthia?
April 28th is publication date.
Okay, good, folks. I'm going to mention it again at the end of the show. You want the menopause gut? You got to get this book. Here's the deal. I'm not going to sit here and talk about it because Cynthia is way more interesting than asking her what's in a book that you guys can go read. Is it going to be also in Audible form?
Yes, I just finished the audiobook. So yes, it will be. And I will not sound like a robot like I did with my first book, because I told them if they gave me the same producer, I was not going to record. They were like, "Oh, we'll make sure you don't have the same producer." I said, "Great."
You know what happened with my book, and I told this to Mike Rowe, and he goes, "Oh, I need to do that." He said to me, he goes, "Your book, you sold a gazillion copies Audible, right?" And I went, "Yeah."
That's
He
what I
goes,
listened to it on.
how did you do that? I said, well, I got tired of reading my own book while I was reading it. So I just started telling stories in the middle of
Yep.
the book. And it got out there on the internet. Hey, get the Audible book. He tells more stories in the Audible book. And I read the whole book. I read the whole book and their stories. So people who read the book also went and got the audio. And Mike
Smart.
goes, what? He goes, that's ingenious. I went, Mike, I didn't mean to do that. I just got bored reading my own words.
Well, you know what's funny is I didn't read the physical book. I just listened to the audio book. So I wouldn't have known that the physical book was different.
No, I went off the page over and over and over, but you can't tell because I go off the page and then I veer back on, and you can't tell the difference because
It's
my book
ingenious.
is written like a third grader wrote it anyway. So it kind of worked. So what are some of the things, and you could talk about men or women, or it might be a combination thereof. We mentioned sleep. Okay. I get it. That's a big thing. Sleep. Yeah. You get some sleep. Your hormones you're going to do better. You eat optimally. Great. What are the things we can do to optimize our health if we're in perimenopause, if we're in andropause? We're pausing somewhere. What can we do to make it better?
Well, let's at least address nutrition specifically, because I think this is relevant to everyone. Number one is protein, which I know your community is super savvy about.
Yeah.
Number two, Vinny, is fiber. And I'll tell you why. Fiber has become the new F word. I have to be very careful who I'm saying this to, because I've actually had some podcast hosts tell me I can come on the podcast, but I cannot speak to fiber.
Why?
Because they don't believe it is necessary. And I said, if you understood physiologically what is changing in the gut microbiome vis-a-vis these hormone changes, you would understand why fiber is even more important. So let's talk about what fiber does.
Wait, hang on. Wait, can I tell you my thing on fiber? Because I don't believe in platforming or non-platforming people. I want to hear everybody's opinion.
Okay.
Right. But can I tell you my thing on fiber?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want you to speak freely about fiber. I don't think we need to take in, Metamucil.
I agree.
I think the fiber needs to come from when you eat yourself a vegetable or fruit or something in between. That's the stuff. You have yourself some kimchi, you got a lot of fiber in there and the whole thing. That's where I think fiber should come from. I do not think we need to supplement fiber with non-soluble fiber that should have been thrown away, but they couldn't figure out how to throw it away. So they put it in a jar called the Metamucil and added an orange flavor to it. Any thoughts?
No, I'm laughing because when I say fiber, everyone thinks about their grandmother's Metamucil, that gelatinous orange nastiness that people drank a lot of. So when we talk about fiber, I am talking about fiber from food. So you ingest the food, whether it's lentils or beans or fruits or vegetables, it goes through your digestive system, gets to the large intestine. There it is fermented. And the little colonocytes, create short chain fatty acids. I'm going to keep this light, I promise. These short chain fatty acids are really important. Some of them cross the blood-brain barrier, like butyrate. You've probably heard of that. They help reduce inflammation in the gut. They're very important for creating mucus in the gut. And I know this sounds gross, but mucus is really important to protect the lining of the digestive system. They're involved in endogenous GLP-1. So endogenous means our own body's way of making GLP-1 in conjunction with some other bacteria. There's a lot that they do. So these decline in the setting of less hormones, which is why fiber becomes more important. And I don't care if you get your fiber from legumes or beans or flax and chia seeds or whatever. I always say, like, for whatever reason, a tablespoon of fresh ground flax and chia seeds, everyone seems to tolerate and doesn't bloat them. I'm like, that will bump up your fiber intake. Now, if you look at the research will suggest 25 to 30 grams a day. Not everyone tolerates that. I'll be completely honest. The average American diet is probably 5 to 10 grams. The fact that there's a lack of fiber in the standard American diet, we think may be a causative reason for why we're seeing more colorectal cancer. So that's kind of a scary thing, right?
Mm.
There are benefits to fiber. And what I will sometimes say is, why don't you just track what you're eating for a week and find out where you are and just have a little bit more. So if you currently have 10 grams, try to aim for 12 or 15. We know there are benefits, but I'm not a fan of a lot of the supplementation because people then forget to eat the food. So it becomes this vicious cycle. And so I'll give you an example. Inulin is a type of supplement that you can take to boost your fiber intake. It does not matter how little inulin I have or as much. I bloat like a balloon. Same thing with PHGG, which is another supplement, partially hydrogenated guar gum. Doesn't that sound fun? And people will say all the time, oh, you need all these, these additional fiber supplements. I'm like, listen, if I get it from the food, then that should be sufficient. So I agree with you. The other thing is there's a tolerability piece. When you start taking all these fiber supplements, people get bloated, they get constipated, they get gassy, they're miserable. And so, what we don't want to do is have you consume foods that then have you not pooping regularly. So that's my gestalt on fiber. And I think that unless I'm talking to a carnivore, I think most people are pretty reasonable.
Yeah, the carnivores, and I'm good friends with some of them.
Me too.
Chafee and all those guys, love them, right? And I've seen carnivore diets help a lot of people, right? But as I tell everyone, it's extreme. It's hard to stay on. Some people stay on it quite well, and I'm happy for you, right? But in some cases, as I tell Anthony, don't come around here telling me that a vegetable is aiming to kill me. I'm sorry. I ain't picking up what you're putting down, brother. And, I get it. He does well on it. A lot of people do well on it. Sean Baker's been on this show. Everybody's been on this show. Like I said, everybody's been on this show once, right? Callie Means, they're trying to make her the whatever muckety mucky in government. She's been on this show. The bottom line is there is no certitude that I will agree with. I think veganism is an eating disorder, and just eating straight carnivore, I can look at now as an eating disorder, even though people do better on just being a straight carnivore than they do on the vegan diet, because at least with the carnivore diet, you're getting more dense nutrients.
Yeah.
That, you got to really fight for in a vegan.
Well, what's interesting is that I would make the argument when someone cannot tolerate anything but meat, that there's probably a microbiome issue. And I'll share you my personal experience. So in 2019, I spent 13 days in the hospital. I got 6 weeks of antibiotics, 6 weeks of antifungals. My gut was decimated. I was full carnivore for 9 months. And it wasn't because I wanted to be, but literally everything gave me diarrhea. And so as my microbiome got built back up, I could start reintroducing foods. And now that my microbiome is much better than it was in 2019, I can eat a lot of fiber. And so I had a colonoscopy in 2020 and one in 2025 because I have a terrible family history of colorectal cancer. And my very astute, his name is Dr. Henry, which is my maiden name. Dr. Henry said, "What did you do differently between 2020 and 2025? And I said, "I increased my fiber intake." He said, "Fantastic." He's like, your colonoscopy was perfect. No inflammation, no hemorrhoids, no nothing. He said, "Your 2025 colonoscopy looks much better than your 2020. And so I use that as an example of just giving people the understanding that, the microbiome is incredibly malleable. But when people tell me they cannot tolerate any plants, any fruits, any vegetables, I automatically think there's something significantly going on with their microbiome. And what's interesting is, as I've been talking to clinicians about the microbiome, several of them have told me that some of their patients who are carnivores end up decimating their microbiome. So it becomes therapeutic for a while. And then they get to a point where they start losing insulin sensitivity and they're not producing certain keystone bacteria because they're being starved of nutrients. And so it's really interesting that there's a degree of bioindividuality. So if someone's listening and they're like, I've been carnivore forever and I'm going to die a carnivore, that's fine. But I think when you start looking at clinically what people are seeing, I do think we're designed to be omnivores, truly. Like, we are designed to be able to have a little bit of both.
Yeah. And, look, I've lived my life that way my entire life. I'm a low carber. I eat low carb. It keeps cancer at bay. I was supposed to have cancer crop up every 5 years. I went 17 years.
It's amazing.
And they finally had to put me back on a little chemo, and I'm good again. There's a lot of broccoli in my life. There's a lot of red meat. There's a lot of pork, fish, chicken. There's a lot of cauliflower in my life. There's a lot of nuts in my life. Not just my wife, but walnuts, pecan, macadamia. It's just the way I live. And people, do you ever miss? It's like, miss what? Miss feeling good? What am I missing?
Yeah.
I have pizza once a year. I might be somewhere in New York with my daughter, and she's like, "Oh my God, this is the best pizza in the world." Yeah, I'm gonna have a slice. People, you don't miss that? It's like, no, I don't miss not feeling good.
Yeah.
I don't. It's, and people, what about ice cream? It's like, yeah, I love ice cream. I'm Italian. That's what we do. But, ice cream a couple of times a year, I love it when I have it. It's, oh my God, it's delicious. And you go right back to eating right again, folks. It's not that difficult.
Well, I remember being at an event with you and the audience was asking you questions and they kept asking the same iteration of the same question.
What was it? I don't remember the question.
Along the lines of, what do you think about this sugar substitute? And it would be like, they'd talk about one, they'd talk about another. And you're like, listen, you got a sugar addiction.
Yeah.
The primary issue is you have a sugar addiction. So when people say to you, Vinnie, why can't you do X, Y? It's because people are addicted to these foods and it's hard for them to imagine not thinking about them all the time. And really that's what I think it comes down to. Like, I do a program a couple times a year called Restart, and it's essentially a whole foods sugar detox. Yeah. And it's interesting to see the constellation of symptoms people experience and what they bring to a call every week. And I always tell them, like, every time I teach this class, I do it right along with you. And for me, the longer and longer I've been teaching this class for 10 years, the longer I do it, the more I realize, like, I was probably just as sugar addicted as the next person when I first started doing it, because I was like, oh, dark chocolate's not a big deal.
Yeah.
You're eating it every day and you're eating it on the weekends and eating it every time at the end of a meal. I mean, then you've got a problem. And so I think a lot of people, Vinnie, to your point, are sugar addicted. And so that's what drives those questions that they ask you, because they're like, I can't imagine not eating those things because I'm so addicted to them.
Yeah. And look, I'm a self-admitted sugar addict. That's why I stay away from it. Almost like an alcoholic stays away from, you can't have one beer.
Right.
If you're an alcoholic. I can't have people go, can I just have a square of chocolate? Who in God's good name ever enjoyed a square of chocolate? I need to eat the whole bar. I need to feel sick to my stomach before I'm done with chocolate. Therefore, I stay away from chocolate. Yeah. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah. It's like, why keep the kryptonite in your house? Like, how many people will say to me, whatever their kryptonite is, I'm like, get it out of your house. Like, if you genuinely want to not provoke a binge or be thinking about it all day long, get it out of your house. Like, just make it easier for yourself. I mean, I live in a house where I have one kid with a nut allergy, so we don't have a lot of nuts.
Right.
And peanuts. And then my other son is dedicated dairy free because it messes up his skin. And I was saying to someone, between the two of them, they're now like, oh, sugar messes up our skin. So they don't even want to eat like sugary junk, which is great. It's not in the house at all. It's so nice. Probably not the norm because I have 2 adult sons, but still, it's like one less thing you have to worry about. Like, my kids finally said to me 2 years ago, "We don't want you to make Christmas cookies because we don't think we're really," it's not that we don't enjoy eating them, but, like, we don't feel good if we eat a bunch of them. And so I said, "This Christmas, I literally did no baking. 0."
Look, I get it. Yeah, and there's not a week that goes by whenever I'm talking to someone that needs to kick the sugar habit, and they'll say, "Well, we have Pop Tarts in the house," and I'll say, "Well, stop buying Pop Tarts." And they'll say, "Well, my kids like them," and I always say to them, "Do you not like your kids?" And then they get really quiet, and because they never thought of it before, right? It's like, well, I don't want to deny my kid, but we all want our kids to be healthy. So you're
Mhm.
going to give them a fucking Pop Tart? That's where we are. I never knew what a fruit roll up was until people told me what a fruit roll up was. Yeah, it's like, well, do you not like your kids? Do you want them to be where you are now? Do you want them to be calling me, I'll be 80 and they'll be 25 going, I'm 350 pounds and I can't stop eating fruit roll up? Yeah. Do you, Cynthia, do you know I ate my first Pop Tart on this show about 2 years
Did
ago?
you? Was
I
it
never
good?
tasted a Pop Tart in my life. No, what I did, no, it wasn't. I never had one ever. And Gina Grad, who used to do my Wednesday show with me, she goes, "All right, bring a Pop Tart in next week." So I went out and bought a pop. I bought. They come in like a box full of them,
Mhm.
and so I brought one in, and it was like raspberry, and it had like frosting on it. So I learned a couple of things. When you peel the frosting off and eat it, it doesn't taste like a sugary frosting. It all works together to so they're tricking your mind into thinking
Yep.
that that's a frosting, but it's some kind of chemical. And when you bite into it, I only ate, like a bite off the edge. And Gina said I had to like break off the edge and like get into it a bit because that's where the nougaty stuff was in the middle. So I took a bite and I chewed it and I gave my comments on it. It tasted weird to me because I'm not used to what chemicals taste like. Right? If I'm gonna have something sweet, it's gonna be like a really good chocolate or,
Mhm.
my wife makes a Christmas cake every year, which is fresh from scratch, or it's gonna be like a really good ice cream that's got 3 ingredients,
Right.
you know, the egg, the milk
Cream.
and the cream and the sugar. So I ate this thing and then she noticed I was going, she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, the roof of my mouth
It's
feels like it's
coated.
coated with like a chemical. And she literally said to me, "Yeah, that's what it's supposed to taste like." And I'm like, "Are you
Ugh.
kidding me?" I have one, that's all a Pop Tart I've ever had in my life because my mom didn't buy them when we were kids.
I
You
don't know
know,
if my parents were pretty, like, my mom was Italian and she was very, like, we made everything. Like, my mom even made
yeah.
our pizzas.
Oh, when we finally got a Pizza Hut I grew up out on the bayou, right in a small town. And we finally got a Pizza Hut when I was a teenager. So we drove over to Pizza Hut and I said, "Hey, I would like a pepperoni pizza." And they brought it to the table. And I looked at it and I said, "I'm sorry, but you forgot to put the anchovies on here." And they looked at me like I was crazy and said, "What's an anchovy?" I went, "It's what you put on a pepperoni pizza." And I went in the back and said, "Can you guys add some anchovies?" They said, "We don't have anchovies here." And I said, "Well, how's this a pizza place?" I didn't know that pizza didn't come without anchovies.
That's so funny.
And by the way, my grandmother, the pizza was always square because she made
Mhm.
it in a square pan and she would cut it into square pieces. You know, yeah, yeah. Weird life.
Yeah, my mom had us eating organ meat and she made our bread, and yeah, we thought we were weird, but I now am appreciative because I probably developed some good eating habits based on the fact that we didn't have the money to eat out. There was no, like I was telling my kids, there was no, like, eating out. We ate at home. there was no money to go out to dinner. We were, my mom was a single parent.
Yeah. We ate out a couple of times a year, like 3 times a year.
Right. Rarely. That's what people did back then. You didn't eat
Yeah.
out all the time.
Oh, it was because my parents were both school teachers and they had 4 kids, and, it was like special occasion, right? And it was it was like a cheap restaurant. Yeah, well, I didn't know.
Yeah. There was no.
There's a menu and you can find whatever you want on that menu. It was kind of neat. Yeah, people eat out all the time. Cynthia, I feel like I've kept you way too long. Hang on, we got to wait till this show uploads and everything, so don't go away.
I'm not going anywhere.
Folks, Villa Capelli olive oil they're the longest running sponsor of this show. Wait, let's ask Cynthia. Cynthia, you're Italian. What do you think about olive oil?
Love it. Use it all the time.
Yeah. Well, you know what?
Saturated fats.
Good. And also, did you know that in the United States, we're able to cut oil, not all oil, but we're able to cut it up to 40% with seed oils and still call it 100% pure olive oil?
It's criminal.
It's criminal. You heard it, folks, from another Italian. You don't want to get the criminal oil. You want to get the stuff from Italy that's non-incriminated. That didn't make any sense. At any rate, Villa Capelli, go get it right now by putting in promo code Vinnie. You'll save 10%. Promo code Vinnie. If you spend more than $135 after the Vinnie discount, they will ship it to you for free. So spend about $150, $155. That means you'll get a 3-liter 10, and they got some herbs de la Provence. They got all this other stuff. Just get it all, put it in your basket, get to about $155. You'll get free shipping, which is a huge savings because you just bought, think about it, 3 liters. In American speak, that's almost a gallon.
Yeah.
Okay? That's a gallon of the good stuff. So you get that, you get all the herbs, you get what you need, and then you put in promo code Vinnie. And 10% every single time. Villa Capelli, let them know you got it here. With me, you know what to do. We all go shopping on Amazon. Before you go to Amazon, go to VinnieTortorich.com. Click through the banner. It puts coal on the fire, gets my train down the track. Also, we have VinnieTortorich.com/workout. Go right now. You can sign up for that. You can get yourself some workouts. Maybe I'll, send them to Cynthia's trainer, and she or he. Is it a he or a she? She can look at him and see how I'm doing as a trainer. I've been doing this for 42, 3, 4 years. Maybe she could tell me I'm doing something wrong. Who knows? But don't listen, folks. It's on pre-order right now. Right now, it's called. Wait, move around. Yeah, thank you. The Menopause Gut by Cynthia Thurlow. She's one of my favorites. Whenever she writes to me, go, hey, I got something. I say, yeah, come on, baby. Love having you on the show. Cynthia Thurlow, the Menopause Gut. Go right now, pre-order it because that matters. It matters a lot because those pre-orders is how she's going to end up on a bestseller list, and then it's going to hit some kind of algorithm. And next thing you know, she's going to be like the richest woman on the planet. But you guys are going to be even richer because you will know all of this stuff. The Menopause Gut, Cynthia Thurlow. Go right now. Cynthia, can we send them to a website or something?
Yeah, you can send them actually to my website. So www.cynthiathurlow.com. There's a banner at the top. You can hit the banner and it'll take you. You can have your choice of retailers you'd like to purchase from. Because I know there are some strong opinions about certain retailers right now. You can pick any of those. It's all the major book outlets. You'll find it.
I can't wait to ask you that question off the air.
I try to be so PC. I'm like, I'm not going to say it.
Yeah. It's so weird that, everything is it's divided. Like the divisiveness that goes on now is just nuts. Someone said to me one time, it's like, how do you go on this guy's podcast? And why don't you go on to NPR? Or why don't you go? It's like, because they don't ask me. If they asked me, I'd be there tomorrow, right? Why don't you go on CNN, bro? It's like, please, wouldn't you go on CNN in a heartbeat if they would ask you?
Of course.
Yeah. I'll go on whoever wants me to go on. I'm that kind of whore. You just call me up. I'll be on your show. I don't care. I don't believe in platforming and non-platforming and everything else. Can we all get along here? Folks, on behalf of the woman who wrote The Menopause Gut, Cynthia Thurlow, my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living and do it with enthusiasm.